The Myrtles Plantation is a historic home and former antebellum plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana, United States. Built in 1796 by General David Bradford, it is touted as one of America's most haunted homes. There are a variety of legends surrounding the Myrtles, which we'll get to shortly, and the house is reputedly built over an Indian burial ground, and the ghost of a young Native American woman has been reported. Handprints in the mirrors, footsteps on the stairs, mysterious smells, vanishing objects, death by poison, hangings, murder and gunfire. The Myrtles Plantation in the West Feliciana town of St. Francisville, Louisiana, holds the rather dubious record of hosting more ghostly phenomena than just about any other house in the country. But what could be more dubious than the honor itself? That would be the questionable history that has been presented to explain why the house is so haunted in the first place. Long acclaimed as one of the most haunted houses in America, the Myrtles attracts an almost endless stream of visitors each year, and many of them come in search of ghosts. There seems to be little doubt about the fact that the house is haunted. It's the reason that it's haunted that has been called into question. For several generations, owners and guides at the plantation have been presenting facts and history that they know is blatantly false. The Myrtles, according to hundreds of people who have encountered the resident spirits, is indeed haunted, but not for the reasons that we've been told. It was a simple check of historical records that revealed the real story. The true story of the Myrtles may not be as glamorous as the story presented by the staff at the plantation, but it is certainly strange. The history of the plantation is filled with death, tragedy, and despair, leading us to wonder why a fanciful history was created in its place. The legend of Chloe and May, possibly the most well-known of the Myrtles' supposed ghosts, Chloe, was reportedly a slave owned by Clark and Sarah Woodruff. According to one story, Clark Woodruff had pressured or forced Chloe into being his mistress. Other versions of the legend have Chloe listening in the keyhole to learn news of Clark Woodruff's business dealings for other purposes. After being caught, either by Clark or Sarah, one of her ears was cut off, and she wore a green turban to hide it. Chloe supposedly baked a cake containing extract of boiled and reduced oleander leaves, which are extremely poisonous. The various legends diverged as to why she did this. A housemaid who was getting the favor of the mistress was a suspect, with some saying she was getting revenge on Woodruffs, and some saying she was attempting to redeem her position by curing the family of the poisoning. According to the legends, her plan backfired. Only Sarah and her two daughters ate the cake, and all died from the poison. Chloe was then supposedly hanged by other slaves and thrown into the Mississippi River, either as punishment or to escape punishment by Clark Woodruff for harboring her. The historical record does not support this legend. There is no record of the Woodruffs owning a slave named Chloe or any other slaves. The legends usually claim that Sarah and her two daughters were poisoned, but Mary Octavia survived well into adulthood. And finally, Sarah, James, Cornelia Woodruff were not killed by poisoning, but instead succumbed to yellow fever. Regardless of the factual accuracy of the Chloe story, some believe a woman wearing a green turban haunted the plantation. So, as one of America's most haunted homes, the plantation is supposedly home to at least 12 ghosts. It is often reported that 10 murders occurred in the house, but historical records only indicate the murder of one, William Winter. In 2001, Unsolved Mysteries filmed a segment about how the alleged hauntings at the plantation. According to host Robert Stack, the production crew experienced technical difficulties during the production of the segment. The Myrtles was also featured on a 2005 episode of Ghost Hunters. Let's begin with the legend, shall we? Or rather, let's go explore. So, the Myrtles changed hands several times over the years, and in the 1970s, it was restored again under the ownership of Arlen Deese and Mr. and Mrs. Robert F. Ward. During this period, the story was greatly embellished to include the poison murders and the severed ear. Up until this point, it was largely just a story that was passed on by word of mouth, and it received little attention outside of the area. All of that changed when James and Frances Kerman Myers passed through on a riverboat and decided to purchase the Myrtles. The house came furnished with period antiques and enough ghost stories to attract people from all over the country. Soon, the story of the Myrtles was appearing in magazines and books and receiving warm reception from ghost enthusiasts who had no idea what they were hearing was a badly skewed version of the truth. The house appeared in a November 1980 issue of Life magazine, but the first look that I have found that mentioned the house was by author Richard Weiner. Both the magazine article and the Weiner book mentioned the poisoned deaths of Sarah Matilda and her daughters. As time went on, authors and television crews came calling at the Myrtles. The story changed again, and this time took on even more murders. In addition to the deaths of Sarah Matilda, her daughters, and Chloe, it was alleged that as many as 6 other people had been killed in the house. One of them, Louis Sterling, the oldest son of Ruffin Gray Sterling, was alleged to have been stabbed to death in the house over a gambling debt. However, burial records in St. Francisville state that he died in October of 1854 from yellow fever. According to the growing legend, 3 Union soldiers were killed in the house after they broke in and attempted to loot the place. They were allegedly shot to the gentleman's parlor, leaving bloodstains on the floor that refused to be wiped away. One fanciful account that has years later, after the Myrtles was opened as an inn, a maid was mopping the floor. She reached the spot where the bloodstains were, and no matter how hard she tried, was unable to clean it. Supposedly, the spot was the same size as a human body. The strange phenomenon was said to have lasted for a month and has not occurred since. There are no records or evidence to say that there were, in fact, surviving family members denied that the story was true. If ghostly incidences occurred, then it must have been caused by something else. Another murder allegedly occurred in 1927 when a caretaker at the house was supposedly killed during a robbery. Once again, no record exists of all this crime, and an incident as recent as this would have been widely reported. The only event even close to this, which may have spawned this story, occurred when the brother of Fannie Williams, Eddie Harrelson, was living in a small house on the property. He was killed during a robbery, but this did not occur in the main house, as the story states. The only verifiable murder to occur at the Myrtles was that of William Drew Winter, and it differs wildly from the legends that have been told. As described previously, Winter was lured out of the house by a rider who shot him to death on the porch. It is here where the stories take a turn for the worse. In the legend, Winter was shot and then mortally wounded, staggered back into the house, passed through the parlor and the ladies' parlor, and onto the staircase that rises from the central hallway. He then managed to climb just high enough to die in his beloved arms on the 17th step. This is simply not true. But again, why ruin a good story, right?